Latest Capitol Hill efforts on immigration reform. Tonight, when night court convenes a new lawsuit over New Jersey's tough new gun laws. Owners of some gear told, turn it over. Are we talking confiscation? Will New Jersey gun owners land in jail if they don't comply? Could it go nationwide? Our Legal Eagles debate. And stick around for a very special Midnight Hero on a mission for the elderly, disabled, single mothers and veterans. He's coming to a lawn near you. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Well, D.C. is buckling up yet again as more bombshells could be looming. The DOJ watchdog report released yesterday tees up new questions about potential FISA surveillance abuses and bias in the Russia investigation. Early next week, the Inspector General will testify before House and Senate committees about his findings. Kristen Fisher is digging into all of it tonight. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon. Well, this hearing should be about as partisan as they come. Republicans will focus on how some senior FBI officials tried to keep President Trump from becoming president, while Democrats will focus on how James Comey hurt their candidate. And both sides will be grilling the two people at the center of this explosive report. The author of the report, the Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz, and the current FBI Director, Christopher Wray. Now, if you want to know what he will say in his opening statement, just listen to the press conference that he held yesterday. He described the report as disappointing. He explained the changes that the FBI will make, but he also defended the Bureau by saying that the vast majority of FBI agents and employees did nothing wrong.
I take this report very seriously, and we accept its findings and recommendations. It's also important, though, to note what the Inspector General did not find. This report did not find any evidence of political bias or improper considerations actually impacting the investigation under review.
Now, today, President Trump talked about the IG report for the very first time. He called it a disgrace. He said the Mueller investigation has been totally discredited, but he also said that he won't interfere with it.
I have said I'm going to stay away from the Justice Department until it's completed. So I've wanted to stay away. Now, that doesn't mean I have to, because I don't have to. I can get involved. But I don't want you people to say that I'm interfering, that I'm doing anything. I think that the report yesterday, maybe more importantly than anything, it totally exonerates me. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction.
But the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says the special counsel should suspend his investigation.
This thing has to change from an investigation of the Trump administration for collusion, which is a made-up charge by Peter Strzok, who said, I'm going to get Trump, I'm going to stop him, I'm going to get him out of the White House. It should become an investigation of Comey, those FBI agents, who should be fired today and in prison next week.
No surprise, though, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer doesn't see it that way.
This report contains no evidence to make any reasonable person conclude that the special counsel investigation is anything other than independent, impartial, and just as important today as it was before this report was issued.
Something else to watch for at Monday's hearing. Expect questions about why that explosive text message between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, the one where Strzok says we'll stop Trump from becoming president. Expect questions about why it took this long for that text message to get out, Shannon.
Yeah, and that's, of course, what we're hearing from Capitol Hill. Folks there that have been saying they've been pressing and pushing for this information. It only comes now that they learn, which leaves them wondering what else they don't know.
Exactly.
All right, well, he'll be before Congress next week, and I'm sure we'll be covering it.
Oh, we'll be watching.
Thank you. All right, President Trump says the report more than anything, quote, totally exonerates him. No collusion, no obstruction. Let's bring in tonight's panel, which I'm guessing may or may not agree on that. Former advisor to President Bill Clinton, Mark Penn, and the chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Evening. Great to be here.
Okay, an interesting piece that you guys may have read. Andy McCarthy, who is a former federal prosecutor, well known to our audience, a Fox News contributor. He's been writing on these issues for months about these investigations. And basically he said it didn't seem like common sense to him that the IG walked us through everything, those biased texts. He said, yes, there was political bias, support for Hillary, and animus against President Trump. But at the end of the day, the actions that were taken were justified. They were reasonable. Andy McCarthy writes that that's just not common sense. You can't look at things in a vacuum. And of course, they're connected. What do you say, Mark?
Well, I think that the Inspector General applied a standard of, was there a justification, aside from politics, for everything that was done, and he concluded that there, by and large, was a justification. Now, you don't have to look at the report with the same standard that he used, because I think that you really have to read the whole report to see the facts here and the culture of bias that was underneath his findings. And when it comes to Peter Strzok, he does single Strzok out and say, you know, when it comes to the Russia investigation, he did exhibit real animus. So I think, look, Hillary comes out of this pretty good, because he basically said that investigation was justified and is basically over. I don't think we're going to repeat that. But Trump also comes out of this pretty good, because it looks like there's some real bias going into the Russia investigation.
Yeah, and Matt, that was a door that was left open. On page 13 of the executive summary, it says most of the text messages raising the questions pertain to the Russia investigation, basically saying that's not what we're investigating. And the implication in some of these text messages, particularly Strzok's August 8th text message, the one that said, quote, "will stop candidate Trump from being elected," was that Strzok might be willing to take official action to impact a presidential candidate's electoral prospects. Now, Strzok did for a time work on the Russia investigation, so does it leave a door open for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I learned is that we failed to remember some basic things. That the very top people at the FBI, the director and the deputy director, were fired. That these other agents that are referred to in the IG report had very senior positions in the FBI, and they were very, very aggressive by injecting politics into all these decisions, Shannon. And I think what really struck me by reading both Andy McCarthy's piece and Byron York's great writings as well is that there was that one tweet, or excuse me, that one message when Ted Cruz drops out, and there's this conversation about, oh, now we've really got to get serious on the midterm review, and we've got to stop Trump. So what the Russia investigation was never really an investigation. It was never really about finding wrongdoing. It was about the politics of stopping Trump. And what I disagree with Mark a little bit is it's the polar opposite when it came to Hillary. It was about clearing Hillary so she could stop Donald Trump. It was all about getting Trump, and Trump called it for what it was, and I can see why he feels like this report makes the whole idea of having a special counsel pretty silly.
All right, Ben Shapiro writes this of the IG review. I'm not making the case that there was a broad-based, well-organized conspiracy inside the FBI to stop President Trump, but it is obvious from the available evidence that, one, certain high-ranking actors inside the FBI felt the necessity to stop Trump from becoming president and were willing to act under color of authority to do so, and two, the leading actors inside the FBI assumed that Hillary would be president and tailored their actions based on that assumption. Mark, the IG goes before the Senate and House on Monday. What do you think he'll get asked?
Well, I think as was said before, Democrats are going to say no bias, right? Wasn't this reasonable? It was reasonable. Republicans are going to do exactly the opposite and say, how could you say this is reasonable? He is going to play it right down the middle, just like his report does. So when people try to get an advantage out of him, I don't think anybody's going to get an advantage, except he really slams Comey. And so I think you could really expect him to be consistent. And hey, the actual story of Comey hiding what he was going to do from the Attorney General is incredible. I couldn't even write that for a movie script, that he's going to rush to the microphone, never tell the Attorney General who he reports to. That is more than insubordination.
Yeah, he did not come out well. A very quick final word to you, Matt.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, the other point it makes is that for all those Democrats who've been saying somehow the FBI is over here isolated by itself as a fourth branch of government, it really reminds all of us that the FBI reports to the DOJ, which reports to the President of the United States, and it's called the executive branch, and the President was right to fire Jim Comey.
All right, gentlemen, Mark, Matt, great to see you both. We'll see what happens on Monday.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort behind bars tonight after a judge revoked his bail, citing new charges that he tried to influence the testimony of two government witnesses. Leland Vitter's following the president's response tonight. Good evening, Leland.
Well, good evening, Shannon. Paul Manafort's Father's Day weekend begins with the very uncomfortable process of entering federal custody, and he will be in jail through his trial. Important to remember, he hasn't been convicted of anything. Instead, prosecutors are upset that he allegedly contacted some potential witnesses. They called it witness tampering, and the judge said that while she didn't like locking Manafort up, she was done with him.
She didn't really have another choice because she had, reprimanded Manafort before. Remember, Konstantin Kilimnik, we heard about prior, he tried to help Manafort ghostwrite this op-ed, and she really took him to task on that one, a couple weeks ago, saying, look, you're not allowed to do this, you're violating the gag order.
The former Trump campaign manager is the biggest fish so far caught up in the special counsel's net. Manafort faces a litany of felonies for his work in Ukraine and then allegedly laundering the money he received. While not directly related to the Russia probe, experts see this as a tactic to pressure Manafort into cooperating. Longtime Trump advisor and former Manafort business partner Roger Stone views it about the same.
It's about pressuring Manafort to plead guilty so that the government doesn't have to go to trial. It's interesting that the government refuses to turn over to Manafort in discovery any information gleaned through surveillance. In fact, they insist that he was never under surveillance, not prior to the Trump campaign, not during the Trump campaign.
While the president distanced himself from Manafort today as someone who was only with the campaign for a short time, there was this tweet of support. Wow, what a tough sentence for Paul Manafort. Didn't know Manafort was the head of the mob. What about Comey and Crooked Hillary and all of the others? Very unfair. The president's lawyer perhaps went a step further, offering this to CNN, alluding to a presidential pardon.
After the investigation is over, then it has to be considered as a governmental matter, not by me. And what the history has been is these things get cleaned up.
Giuliani's missive and the presidential tweet leading to speculation. They are both communications meant for Manafort himself, encouraging him to stay strong and not turn state's evidence against the president. Shannon?
Well, he's got a lot of time to think about it now. Bye,
Yeah.
Bars. Leland, thank you very much. Well, during today's spur-of-the-moment media blitz from the president, he called North Korean leader Kim Jong-un a, quote, strong head of state. Then he made this comment that raised some eyebrows.
He speaks and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
What did you mean just now when you said you wished Americans would sit up at attention when you spoke?
I'm kidding. You don't understand sarcasm.
All right, let's break it down with some more highlights from the president's surprise press gaggle with Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason. Great to have you with us tonight.
Nice to be with you.
Okay, so he got a second bite at that question when he had someone ask him directly about it. He does speak often in hyperbole and sarcasm. What did you make of that exchange?
He does, and as you said, he had a chance to answer that when he was asked about it, and he said he was joking. But I think one of the reasons it hasn't sat well with some people is that he does often make comments that are positive or praising of dictators and hardline leaders, and that comes in the context of just having gotten back from the G7, where he was doing the opposite in many cases about U.S. allies.
Well, and speaking of that, there is now talk about whether or not he will go and sit down with Russian President Vladimir Putin for a face-to-face meeting. Here's what he said on that point today.
It's possible that we'll meet, yeah. And I thought, this all started because one of you asked, should Putin be in the G7? I said, no, he should be in the G8. A few years ago, Putin was in what was called the G8. I think it's better to have Russia in than to have Russia out.
It seems to be his theory, at least what I infer from that, is that they are major players in everything that's happening from Syria to North Korea, the Middle East, and that if you're going to work on solving those kinds of problems, he wants them to be at the table. Otherwise, you're negotiating in vain. How did you take it? I mean, he's taken a lot of heat for that.
He has, but he's taken a lot of heat for some time for the relationship that he has wanted to build with Russia. He's obviously has this Russia investigation going on at the same time, so there's a lot of political risk and heat for him there anyway. And there's the fact that President Putin was kicked out of the G8, which became the G7, because of having annexed Crimea. So there are a lot of reasons from both sides of the political aisle for Russia not to be at that table. But the president, I think, as you said, I think his view is he wants to have a relationship with President Putin. He wants to have a relationship with Kim Jong-un. He wants to have a relationship with these leaders because he thinks that will be productive for the United States.
He does talk about these different coalitions in terms of relationships, even when he was asked about going into North Korea and sitting down and, being criticized for not doing preparation, although we were told he was briefed repeatedly by Ambassador Bolton and Secretary of State Pompeo. But he kept talking about the fact that for me, it's about a relationship. I want to sit down face to face with this guy and see if we can connect. And now he says they did.
Exactly. And he is a leader both before he became a politician and now in the White House who operates very much on instinct and building that relationship, be it in his business career or now that he's in the White House. Now, not everyone thinks that's good enough, but that's a lot of where his confidence comes from.
Were you surprised at all by this today? I mean, obviously he had talked about that he was going to be on the White House lawn to talk to Steve Doocy from Fox and Friends. And of course,
he didn't give much warning about that.
Well, no, but once you see him out there, then everybody else is scrambling to try to get him on his way back in. But sometimes I think he prefers off the cuff, and you can get good stuff from him, at least interesting stuff.
Oh, I do too. No, I think he likes to surprise people. He likes to surprise reporters, and he does come and talk to reporters often, whether it's what he did today, which was unusual for sure, or when it's on his way to the airport, to the helicopter on his way to Andrews Air Force Base.
Yeah.
So we get chances to ask him questions, and he makes news at them, be it on Russia or anything else.
He does. The shouted question with him usually pays off, even as the handlers are saying, that's it, get out.
He likes to engage.
He does.
Yeah.
He really does. And he likes to joust as well, as
Agreed.
you know.
Yeah.
Jeff Mason, thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
All right. At the same time that North Korea was pledging peace during the historic summit with President Trump, they were also reportedly escalating cyber attacks on South Korea. Jillian Turner digs into the details for us tonight.
You are entering into the most dangerous country on earth.
4 years after a Hollywood movie prompted North Korea to unleash a devastating cyber attack on the United States, the Hermit Kingdom remains one of the most dangerous nations on earth. Now, in the wake of this week's historic summit, cybersecurity experts are again ringing alarm bells.
If at any point in time they don't like where the negotiations are going, or they don't like the world's reaction, or they're upset about sanctions, at any point in time, they have proven they will flex their muscle and they will use their cyber operations either against the government, private sector businesses, and or individuals.
One executive with security firm FireEye claims North Korean hackers carried out attacks on financial institutions as recently as last week, even as the summit itself was underway. Experts tell Fox News North Korea's never actually stopped conducting gray zone warfare in cyberspace because they simply can't afford to.
The financial motivations are real. They've been under economic sanctions for decades. They need money to fund the government. They basically have learned how to monetize anything they're able to get their hands on digitally.
The regime's been steadily building up its arsenal of cyber weapons over the past decade, and it's now more powerful than ever before. But experts worry the nuclear program is now sucking up the world's attention and energy.
You have a much easier time spotting a nuclear arsenal or artillery or troops movements than you are elite cyber operatives. And so they've been creating this capability, almost hiding in plain sight.
Now, the million-dollar question for the Trump administration is how to respond to the cyber threat in the midst of ongoing diplomatic negotiations.
But why would they take such risks in the first place? The answer is simple. They think they can get away with it. And too often they have.
Just 2 days ago, experts issued a stern warning to journalists in Singapore about the USB fans they were given in gift bags at the summit. They caution it's likely that either North Korea, Russia, or both have programmed those devices to hack into Western systems. Shannon?
Jillian, thank you very much. Well, confusion over the immigration bill as the president sends mixed messages. So do we have clarity tonight? Well, Trace will be here to sort it out.
I need a bill that gives this country tremendous border security. I have to have that. We have to get rid of catch and release.
Does that mean the wall?
We have to have the wall. If we don't have the wall, there's no bill.
And Senator Lindsey Graham comes out swinging against his critics who say he's a hypocrite for working with the president. That's up next.
If you don't like me working with President Trump to make the world a better place, I don't give a
That may not be the case. Trace Gallagher is here tracking the very latest on where immigration and the latest deal stands at this hour. Trace?
Well, Shannon, talk about bringing a rolling train to a screeching stop after GOP leaders circulated draft copies of 2 immigration bills late yesterday on Capitol Hill. The plan today was for House Majority Whip Steve Scalise to gauge support for the various proposals. Instead, the president said this on Fox and Friends. Watch.
I'm looking at both of them. I certainly wouldn't sign the more moderate
What does the
one.
bill have to have in it?
I need a bill that gives this country tremendous border security.
So when Ohio GOP Congressman Jim Jordan was asked if Republicans could pass an immigration immigration bill without the president's support? He tersely replied, no. And Republicans' Chief Deputy Whip Patrick McHenry clarified, saying, quote, House Republicans are not going to take on immigration without the support and endorsement of the president. Democrats feigned surprise, with California Congressman Peter Aguilar saying, quote, you mean the president complicated the situation with a comment? I just don't find this shocking. And Aguilar has a point. Back in January, hours before the House was set to vote on controversial legislation renewing the National Security Agency's warrantless surveillance program, the president tweeted that the program was used to, quote, badly surveil and abuse the Trump campaign. But after today's confusion, the White House later weighed in, saying it was a misunderstanding. And the president does support the GOP immigration legislation, which appears to include everything he asked for. $25 billion to build the wall, getting rid of the visa lottery program, allowing 1.8 million DACA recipients, also known as Dreamers, to apply for a path to permanent residency, and ending the controversial practice of separating families detained at the border, though the president blames that on Democrats. Watch.
The Democrats forced that law upon our nation. I hate it. I hate to see separation of parents and children. The Democrats can come to us as they actually are.
Except there is no law mandating immigrant families be separated, though there is a 2008 policy called the Alien Transfer Exit Program, which has resulted in thousands of families being split up. It was used by the Bush and Obama administrations. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher on the West Coast. Thank you. Well, another factor playing into the immigration debate is the policy of separating children from their families, as Trace talked about, when their parents cross the border illegally. Casey Stiegel is in Texas reporting on details from HHS about a new facility they want to use to house children there. Casey.
Shannon, good evening. The Department of Health and Human Services confirming that another new shelter location has been selected to house these unaccompanied minors. Tornillo, Texas, the port of entry there out near El Paso, is a newly announced spot that will soon accommodate up to 360 children in the next few days. That is 796 miles from Brownsville, Texas, where this spot is located. You're looking at video given to us by HHS because media have not been widely let inside this giant former Walmart store turned child housing facility filled with about 1,500 boys. All of the unaccompanied minors here are those who the feds say broke the law by crossing into the U.S. illegally, usually with a family member or parent. So this controversial zero tolerance policy, now separating the kids from their parents, well, that's because adults are being sent into the justice system right away. So U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has said it's about enforcing a law and not being, quote, mean to children. However, a growing number of people, organizations, groups have denounced this sudden enforcement, including medical professionals like the American College of Physicians and the American Psychological Association, who now say, regardless of nationality, the trauma and fear these children are being exposed to will translate into both physical and mental health problems for life.
It is really un-American to weaponize children to stop unlawful immigration. Using the separation of children from parents as a threat to deter immigration is harmful and inexcusable.
Fort Bliss and two other military installations here in the Lone Star State also being considered for additional temporary housing units. That also from HHS. But what we haven't been able to get a clear answer on whether some of these new detention facilities will in fact look more like tent cities. HHS saying some structures are soft-sided with air conditioning, but wouldn't elaborate any further. Shannon.
Casey Stiegel in Texas, thank you. Up next, a stunning message to Seattle about its exploding homeless problem. And unions are freaking out about the countdown to the Supreme Court ruling on forcing public sector workers to pay union dues. Radio host Ethan Behrman joins us next with his unique take. And now the city has reportedly just lost out on hosting a national business convention because of aggressive behavior, open drug use, and homeless people defecating on downtown streets. So it's not an easy problem to solve. Let's discuss it and a few more topics tonight with radio host at KGO AM, Ethan Behrman. Great to have you with us, Ethan.
Thank you, Shannon. Great to be here.
Okay, so I'm going to read part of a letter that comes from the American Pharmacy Association. They'd sent an advance team to scout out Seattle as a possible place for their 6,300 people to come for convention. They said this, what they found: 2 men urinating on the street, 1 man who defecated on himself. We witnessed 3 young addicts sitting outside of a major establishment smoking from a pipe. Was passed out. 1 man aggressively pursuing a member of our team down the street demanding cash. We lost count of the number of people walking around talking to themselves. The smell of urine and marijuana near the convention center and along the routes of our hotels to the center. They said no thanks. And listen, the visitors group and convention center there is now very worried about this. They sent this along to city leaders and said, our city is falling apart.
Yeah, it's tragic, right? These are people who actually need help desperately. It's both a health issue for the rest of the community. It's a health issue for the individuals that we're talking about that were homeless, that were urinating, that were defecating, that were using drugs, whatever. This is a difficult issue that needs to be addressed. And by the way, it can't just be on the city of Seattle, the city of San Francisco, the city of Los Angeles. This really requires federal resources because not all of these homeless people are local, originally from Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles. They are coming from other parts of the country, but because you can live through winter on the West Coast, this is the safe place to shelter.
One analyst points out that in 2005, Seattle launched a 10-year program to rid homelessness, and now the numbers are higher than when they started the program. He says that 10 cities and areas are subsidized by the city. They actually encourage some of this behavior, and they're rewarding it, and by subsidizing it, you're going to get more of it. What do you make of that argument?
Well, the problem, let's get to the root cause here, cost of housing. So we have a nationwide shortage of housing. On the West Coast in particular, we have an exceptional shortage of housing, affordable housing. So if we can't afford to live in houses, even people who don't necessarily have mental health issues, maybe aren't fleeing abusive homes, which is another subset of the homeless population, there are people who simply can't afford to live, and so they are on the streets. We have to address the cost of housing, but we have to change some of the laws because there are people with real serious mental health issues that need our help and care. And the way that most of the laws are written today is we're not allowed to infringe on what are perceived as their civil rights, but we need to give them that care so they can get better and live a productive life again.
And one article that I read said a guy that had worked with homelessness and volunteered quite a bit for years said that other cities know how welcoming Seattle is, and that they actually sometimes, people who've been arrested in other cities, they give them a bus ticket and send them to Seattle. So that's another issue. I want to talk to you also. We're waiting the Supreme Court ruling about whether or not, in this case, the plaintiff is a public school teacher in California. He doesn't want to be forced to join a union and pay the dues. So the Supreme Court is now ruminating on that. We could get the decision as early as Monday morning. The American Federation of Teachers attorney Randy Weingarten, a prominent voice out there, had this to say: the notion that somebody else is going to try to take away our power to have a voice has blanked off, I won't say it, my grandmother's listening, our members. You can guess what the word is. But the fact is, this teacher says, you're taking away my First Amendment right by making you give me my money to endorse your message as a union. What do you think?
Well, I mean, in this case, so the teachers voted to unionize, and they have, and as a result, there's collective bargaining. That other teacher is benefiting from what the union has negotiated, is getting a salary, getting benefits based on how that union is negotiated. So if you don't want to pay the dues, start an effort to decertify the union. That actually has happened here in California in the agricultural regions, at Garawan Farms, for example. So you can decertify a union if you don't like what the union is doing, but the overwhelming majority of teachers here do want the union and support the union. We just have a couple of people who are apparently unhappy with it.
Well, we'll see. You need 5 on the Supreme Court to win one way or the other in this, and we'll see what they decide. Quickly, I want to ask you about Senator Lindsey Graham. He's a frequent guest on this show. On another network, he was talking about people who are critical of the president. He says, you know, I work with him. If you don't like me working with him to try to make the world a better place, I don't give a blank. What do you make of that?
You know, Lindsey Graham is an interesting character, especially since he sadly lost the primary in 2016, the Republican primary. Here's what I have to say about this for Lindsey Graham and some of the others, but particularly Lindsey tonight. As Senator Graham, I want to say this. I support you in wanting to work with people with whom you might disagree on certain topics. This is what's actually missing in politics right now is if I'm of a different party, if I don't agree with you on one topic, doesn't mean I can't work with you on any other topic. Americans need to find a way to start communicating, need to start working together again. I won't use the word that he used either because we can't anyway, but and your grandmother is watching, you said, Shannon. But the point is without that language, let's work together, find areas of commonality, and move our country forward. I support him in it.
All right, Ethan Behrman, have a great weekend. Great to have you with us.
Shannon, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. All right, time now for Where in the World? Well, the Wall Street Journal reporting on new alleged details of President Trump's meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron at the G7 summit, sourced to an unnamed European Union official. According to that source, President Trump told French President Macron he must know all about terrorism since, quote, all the terrorists are in Paris. That apparently irritated the Europeans in the room. New tonight, the White House says the two spoke this evening about a range of issues, including President Trump's meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the future of the Iran deal. Now, they are stepping up security at the Eiffel Tower tonight. French authorities are installing new bulletproof glass walls to protect the landmark against terror attacks. The Spanish port city of Valencia anticipating the arrival of some 630 migrants Sunday in what's turning out to be a major media event. The migrants were denied entry into Italy and Malta. Italy's interior minister says saving lives at sea is a duty, but transforming Italy, he says, into an enormous refugee camp is not. He added Italy is done bowing down its head and obeying. To India tonight and the capital, New Delhi, where air pollution is getting so bad, the government's ordered a 2-day construction halt trying to reduce the smog. World Health Organization labeled Delhi the world's most polluted city. Well, the governor of New Jersey signs a sweeping new group of gun restrictions into law, and a lawsuit is immediately filed by a group that says it'll make law-abiding citizens into criminals, and it won't stop criminals at all. Next up, night court. Our two attorneys, there they are, legal eagles, standing by to argue both sides. You're our jury tonight, so stay with us. Control laws this week. The laws range from background checks on all private sales, requiring proof of a justifiable need if you actually want to carry a handgun in public, to a ban on magazines containing more than 10 rounds, and more. Well, the law reportedly gives gun owners 180 days to hand in or modify those kinds of magazines or face up to 18 months in jail and up to $10,000 in fines. The Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs is filing suit. They've done it to try to stop the law. Let's bring in our legal eagles, criminal defense attorney David Bruno and Ken Klukowski, senior counsel at First Liberty Institute. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, Shannon.
Okay, so this is what the plaintiff has to say. This unconstitutional law will be ignored by criminals and madmen and affects only law-abiding citizens. It turns 1 million people into criminals with the stroke of a pen, limits self-defense, and takes away property lawfully acquired. Buy it yesterday, ban it today, go to prison tomorrow. It's the Jersey way. And the goal of our lawsuit is to boot this law, which makes no one safer, into the trash heap of history where it belongs. David, that's rather colorful. You're a Jersey guy. What's your response?
I am. Former assistant prosecutor, and I practice criminal defense.
Yeah.
This is going to be a constitutional law, and I say that because we have some precedent, although it's not legally binding. It's out of the Second Circuit and the Ninth Circuit. In those cases, the circuit courts have found that the California, Connecticut, and New York laws that also banned over 10 rounds was found constitutional under immediate scrutiny. So that is really what I anticipate would happen with this case as well as the Third Circuit decision.
Okay, I want to play a little bit of what the governor had to say at the bill signing for these various laws. Here's what he said.
Smart, comprehensive, and common sense gun safety laws will do much more to keep our communities safe than the guns on every street corner and guns in every classroom thinking of the gun lobby.
Guns on every street corner and guns in every classroom, Ken.
Well, I'll tell you, Shannon, I think that that this law, when it goes up on appeal, is going up to the Third Circuit. And that circuit, by an 8-7 vote a couple years ago, actually struck down a federal, not just a state, but a federal gun control law. And I think the lawsuit is exactly correct. There are 9 million people in New Jersey. 1 million of them are instantly turned into criminals just because there's no grandfather provision even for firearms that they already have. Over 30 30% of firearms use more than 10 rounds. So when you're doing this, the Second Amendment is a fundamental right. And this lawsuit is being argued by no one less than the law firm of Chuck Cooper, the former head of the DOJ's elite Office of Legal Counsel. I mean, these people really have like a ninja master team litigating this case on their behalf, and they're right. It violates the Second Amendment. It violates Fifth Amendment taking clause rights because the government is saying you have to throw away all this property that you have, and they're not giving you any compensation for it. And it's an equal protection violation because it treats some classes of people differently than others and provides no reasoned basis in that regard. So, I mean, this is going to be a very serious lawsuit as it goes up on appeal.
Well, and David, to that point, a lot of folks are most concerned about the fact that there's no grandfathering. Instead of just, there'd be a lawsuit even if they were saying all purchases going forward, I have a feeling. But in this case, they basically are giving you several options, including turning in what you have to law enforcement. Do you think that part of this law withstands constitutional scrutiny as well? The fact that there's no grandfathering, and something that a lot of people would argue feels like confiscation.
Certainly the best argument, absolutely. But listen, we've talked about circuit courts right now. What we really need to hear from is the United States Supreme Court. Just like in that Heller case. The Heller case said that the Second Amendment is not absolute. Interesting enough, in the Ninth Circuit case in 2014, the U.S. Supreme Court had the opportunity to stay the 10-round law, and a Justice Kennedy opinion did not. So that's all we've really heard from the United States Supreme Court on the ammunition. So finally, I think they need to step up and clarify this for the nation.
Yeah, Ken, quickly, do you think they will? Because they've turned away a lot of appeals that people thought were teed up to answer some of these questions. And Justice Thomas, in writing a dissent to one of those decisions, said they're treating the Second Amendment like a second-rate or second-tier constitutional right. It should be on par with all the rest of them.
That's right. The Supreme Court hasn't taken up any case since Heller in 2008 and McDonald in 2010. They certainly need to. They've turned down a number of gun control challenges recently. And I think as we're looking at potentially changing membership on the U.S. Supreme Court, that may break the logjam in terms of getting these issues there over the next couple of years.
Do you know something we need to know? We are standing by. I'll be back at the court Monday for opinions and any announcements any of the justices would like to make. All right, David and Ken, thank you both very much.
Thanks so much, Shannon. God bless.
Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Everybody at home, you're the jury. Let us know at Shannon Bream or at Fox News Night what you think. By the way, if you've got a lawn in need, our Midnight Hero is a good friend indeed. Stick around to hear about Rodney Smith Jr.'s amazing cross-country journey, and it is all for a great cause. He joins us live. Mothers and the disabled by mowing lawns in all 50 states. Rodney Smith is here live tonight, and the organization he founded is called Raising Men Law Care Service. Rodney, you're amazing. I saw your story on Twitter. I'm like, we have to get him on. You're going to be mowing in Shreveport, Louisiana tomorrow. You kind of just make the announcement, find out who needs something done, and you go mow their lawn. How in the world did you get inspired to start doing this?
Well, back a few years ago, I had a one-on-one conversation with God, and I asked him to use me as his vessel. He didn't give me an answer right then and there, not a week later, not a month later, but it came to me the day I came across an elderly man outside mowing his lawn, and it looked like he was struggling, so I pulled over and I helped him out. That night, I decided to mow free lawns for the elderly, disabled, single moms, and veterans. At first, my goal was to mow 40 lawns by the end of winter, because at the time I was getting my bachelor's in computer science. But I reached 40 lawns so quick that I upped my goal to 100. A month and a half later, I reached my 100th lawn, and that's when the idea of Raising Men Lawn Care Service came about, where we will still mow free lawns for the elderly, disabled, single moms, and veterans, but we will also include kids ages 7 to 17 and show them the importance of giving back to their community with a lawnmower.
Yeah, and some of those kids are in this video. It's great because what you do is now challenge them to go out and mow lawns. After they complete so many, you send them special T-shirts, and sometimes when you show up somewhere to mow, they actually join you. People who are part of this program.
Yeah, so we have something called the 50-yard challenge, which is a challenge issued to kids nationwide and even worldwide to mow 50 free lawns in their community for the elderly, disabled, single moms, and veterans. So let's say you have a kid right here in Shreveport, Louisiana that accepted the 50-yard challenge. They'll make a sign saying, I accept the 50-yard challenge. In return, we will send them a white Raising Men Lawn Care Service t-shirt along with shades and ear protection. Once they mow 10 lawns, they get an orange shirt, 20 a green, 30 a blue, 40 a red, and 50 a black.
Wow.
And once they reach 50, we fly to wherever they are, we do lawns with them, and we also give them a brand new lawnmower. So kids nationwide are taking part of it. 12 kids have so far nationwide have completed it, and we currently have 130 plus kids nationwide, including 1 in Canada and 7 in Bermuda and England that are taking part in this challenge.
Can you tell me quickly how it makes you feel to complete one of these lawns for folks?
Oh man, it makes me feel good because I know that I'm making a difference. I've come across so many people, especially elderly people who are on fixed incomes and that they can't really afford it. So when we can come cut it for free, they can use those funds for medication and food and other things they really need.
Rodney, you are an angel. You are our first ever live Midnight Hero. I'm inspired by you. It makes me think about what I can do for other people. Have a great day mowing tomorrow.
Yes,
We're going to keep watching you on Twitter. Thanks, Rodney.
Have a nice one. Bye-bye.
You too. All right, most watched, most trusted, and tonight, most inspired by Rodney. We're glad that you spent the evening with us. Go do something nice for someone this weekend.